What's up, everybody? Jackson Fuller here, and you are listening to the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic. It's about 8:40 a.m. here on Monday, March 25th, and the Arkansas baseball team is still ranked number one in the country, but the winning streak did come to a close over in Auburn this weekend. It was still a good and productive series for the Razorbacks as a whole. Hutch will join me in a sec, and we will recap everything from the Auburn series, take maybe a quick look at the big matchup at home this weekend against LSU, and have some transfer portal talk for the Arkansas basketball team. So we'll play that rock music, bring Hutch in, and get the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic rolling. What's up, Hutch? How's it going, man? Is your NCAA March Madness bracket still perfect? Is it on its last legs? I mean, are we feeling good? Are we out on the tournament at this point after the first weekend?
I mean, I guess I'm trying. I think all of my Final Four teams are still alive, and my championship. I know for a fact my championship game is still alive, but I didn't exactly go out on a limb picking Purdue over UConn. So we'll see. You know, I did have Duke in my Final Four, just because I thought it would be hilarious to see Duke and Purdue in the Final Four after Arkansas beat both of those teams. But yeah, it's been some fun games.
Yeah, it was a good first weekend. Not as many upsets maybe as we've had in the past, but still, like, I think the Sweet 16 is going to be awesome now because we didn't maybe get those upsets. We've got some great matchups. Yeah, my bracket's pretty much toast, but I still have all my Final Four teams. That kind of helps when things go a little chalk. But anyways, the Arkansas basketball team not in the NCAA tournament, so let's minimize our discussion there and head to Auburn, where Arkansas baseball went on the road for the first time this season. Really, a true road game. Of course, they did go to Arlington for the Kubota College Baseball Series, but that was basically a home series for Arkansas with how many Hog fans made the trip over to Texas. And Arkansas goes 2-1 on the weekend. They win a pitcher's duel on Thursday night, a really back and forth wild one on Friday, and then Saturday. They just let go of the rope a little bit there at the end. I think Auburn was the more desperate team for the sweep. Hutch, I asked you before the weekend on last podcast what would quantify as a success, or qualify maybe as a success here in Auburn. I assumed it would be 2 out of 3 games. You said maybe even stealing one, kind of depends on the context. Well, they got two, so this has to be just a resounding success to go into Auburn and take 2 out of 3. And Arkansas now 5-1 in the SEC. They're tied with Kentucky for first place right now.
Yeah, I know Arkansas fans will look at that blowing a 4-run lead in the 6th inning in Game 3 and be like, "Oh man, it was terrible, horrible weekend." But anytime you win 2 out of 3, it's a big time accomplishment, especially on the road against a ranked team that, as you said, was extremely desperate. That's a team that had gotten swept in the first week of SEC play, and they were really needing a win, and they were playing in front of a record crowd at their ballpark, and it was, you could tell that was. I kind of got, whenever they went to the bullpen in the 6th inning and they brought in Cooper Dossett, I was like, I don't got a good feeling about this. And then lo and behold, it kind of all unraveled.
Yeah, let's get to the negatives in a little bit. I think though that they lost a game for the first time in 3 weeks, so there are some negatives, but not too many. I think we still let's start optimistic. I agree. I think that it, they put themselves in a good spot to win Game 3 and didn't come through, and that's disappointing. But for me, I really have to say I left this weekend so impressed with Will McIntyre again, and we've seen it all year. But look, the Auburn has a better lineup probably than any team Arkansas has faced this season, other than Oregon State. And now McIntyre saw them twice and was exceptional both times in high leverage spots. The first game, protecting a 1-0 lead, he pitched the 7th and the 8th, and then in Game 2, he pitched the 9th to get the save, both times with a 1-run lead, both times preserving the advantage, and Arkansas ends up hanging on for the victories. For me, as someone that hasn't been around the program for too long, I was still a little skeptical of how Will McIntyre's stuff would translate over to the best lineups in the SEC. And it translated just fine in weekend one. He's clearly the top arm out of the bullpen, even if he might not be the designated closer. He's going to be the guy that Van Horn trusts the most. So I thought, McIntyre doing that on the road, kind of being the veteran arm out of the bullpen and coming through like that was good to see. Who was your maybe MVP from the series, or the person that who tickled your fancy the most from this weekend among the Arkansas baseball team?
Oh man, that's a good question. I gotta say, I don't have his actual numbers right in front of me, but to see the Heva Aloy come through, hit that home run in game one. I think he walked and was hit by a pitch, and also had his line out in game one. He had hit like 112 miles an hour off the bat or something like that, just right to the center fielder. It seems like I know he had a hit in game three. He's hovering right around 250 now, his batting average. That's not great by any means, and not what we all kind of expected out of him. But when you factor in that he got off to just an incredibly slow start, then he's doing pretty good. So I really like what I've been seeing from him, swinging the bat. I that cause, and then of course Hagen Smith. I mean, it's almost taken for granted at this point what he does. I mean, he's incredible. He had him. I think it was like the sixth inning, and the bases were loaded thanks to a really bad error where Roslovich just dropped a fly ball in front of the wall, and he got out of it. That was big time. That tells me like that guy does not get rattled. He does not unravel when things get tough. That happened a few times in his first couple of years when something bad happened and he couldn't get out of it. But time and time again this year, it doesn't bother him. He gets out of it and gets through it. Either minimizing the damage or really, for the most part, completely eliminating any type of damage.
Yeah, I think we might have to have a weekly segment. Let's read Hagen Smith's stats for the year because, gosh, they're really impressive. Of course, 4-0 with a 1.24 ERA, but now he's got 62 strikeouts in only 29 innings pitched, just 10 walks. Of course, he's only given up 4 runs, and 3 of those came in the very first inning of the season. So over the past 28 innings, he's only given up just 1 run, and it was off a solo homer. He's, when he works himself into trouble, he's getting out of it, but he's hardly ever working himself into trouble because of just how many strikeouts he's racking up. And it's really just jarring to see when you have a pitcher with that kind of stuff, how much that limits the opposing team at the plate when they can't even put contact on the ball. They can't even put pressure on the opposing defense. And it's because of really that combination of velo and an absolutely devastating slider that Hagen Smith has. And I thought it was interesting listening. This is the first time I really heavily listened to a broadcast for Arkansas baseball. And one thing the announcers said, and I didn't think they were great all weekend, but I did love hearing them say that Hagen kind of, a lot of times in tough spots, he goes to that slider because maybe he has more control over it than his fastball, or just as much control over it as his fastball. And one of those pitches is is straight, and if it's out of the zone, it stays out of the zone. One of those pitches might start in the zone and finish out, and can get hitters to chase. And the slider's just been. I know he upticked his velo, but his ability to control that pitch and to throw it out of the zone when he needs to, like 1-2, 0-2 counts, I think that's been the biggest key for his season so far. But the longevity, we're now seeing it, right? Back-to-back 6-inning starts, Hutch. I mean, is this something that we think maybe 6 is going to be his max all year, or are you thinking they're still building him up for maybe 7, 8 in the coming weeks of the SEC?
Well, he threw 87 pitches, I believe it was, this past weekend in 6 innings. So if they were going to let him go to 100, they could have sent him back out there. And honestly, had the error not happened that I mentioned, he would have thrown 9 fewer pitches and only been at 78 pitches through 6, and he 100% would have gone out for the 7th inning. And personally, I think he would have gotten through the 7th. So I could definitely see him going 6 or 7. Week in, week out. I mean, there may be a start in there where he kind of, loses that location a little bit and gets a little bit wild. But we really haven't seen that a whole lot aside from, that first game of the season. And hopefully we'll not see any games in, the 30-degree temperatures the rest of the season. So Yeah, he's been incredible. I just pulled up the NCAA stats. Hagen Smith still leads the country in strikeouts per 9 innings, averaging 19.2. The next closest guy is only averaging 17.6. So he's got a pretty healthy lead, and he's doing it as a starter. That's the crazy thing. I think this number 2 guy is doing it primarily out of the bullpen as kind of like just a multi-use guy, and he's averaging 17.6. That's remarkable. So I keep thinking that number's going to come down eventually. Just you think, but we're 2 weeks in SEC play and it's still hovering right up there over 19. That's insane.
Yeah, and it's something too. I think that um, the like this is what Dave Van Horn has been kind of talking about all year, right? Like, or all preseason, and just about how good he was going to be this year, and how it was really going to be a special season for Hagen. And even when he had that first blow up, I mean, in the first game of the season in the freezing cold, I don't think anybody was panicking, but there was definitely some like, that wasn't exactly the start anybody imagined. Like, is there any concern, any hesitation, maybe of that didn't go as planned? And there really was no concern at all. I mean, DVH couldn't have been more relaxed after that start about Hagen. He knew he was going to bounce back against Oregon State, and that start against the Beavers really set the tone for the rest of the season, for the rest of his season so far. I think we got to also shout out when we're talking about the pitchers. I mean, Mason Molina, he continues to be terrific. And I know DVH was a little disappointed with the pitch count and him not being able to get to a sixth inning on Sunday. But at the same time, I mean, if your Sunday pitcher throws 5 innings and gives up just 1 run, that's about all you can ask for. And I know Arkansas fans are at the program is a little spoiled right now with a Friday ace pitching on Sunday, and they're going to want more from Mason down the road. But, you know, he now has climbed into, I believe, the top 10 of strikeout percentage, or maybe he was always there and dropped a little bit because he only had 4 this weekend. But he's been a terrific, reliable guy, pretty much all season. And I got to say, I thought, if I didn't think that the bullpen was going to let the team down as the way that they did in that third game, with a 4-run lead, or however, 4-run lead, and letting Auburn come all the way back. But definitely no fault of Molina. Are you thinking that there's going to be a lot of focus from DVH and Coach Hobbs to get him to 6-7 innings, or was that maybe just a little bit of post-game press conference frustration coming off a loss? How big a deal do you think it is to the staff that he couldn't kind of get to that sixth inning?
I don't think it's too much of a frustration just because of how good he was. And I know, really the thing that got him this past weekend wasn't necessarily pitch count because he was still only, I think, at 74 pitches. So, I mean, that's still well under what you think he could go. But he was starting to kind of lose it. The fourth inning, he got a little bit wild, had some walks, hit a guy. And then there in the fifth inning, they actually started to hit him a little bit, and that's how they got the run. Although the run, in my opinion, should have been unearned because I thought that it should have been an error on Wilmsmeyer out in center. I guess I could see how it was a double. He was kind of bumping into the wall when he dropped it. Whatever. Either way, it's just 1 run. But they were hitting him harder. So I do think that's kind of why they made the decision when they did. But yeah, if they could get him to just not be quite as wild, Dave has said he's effectively wild, and that is good, because it usually means you're not going to be giving up many hits, and he isn't. But because he's had a couple of games this year where he's had a no hitter through 5 innings, which is pretty impressive, especially at the college level. So I don't think it's too much of a concern. I think they're just kind of like, when it happens, it's going to be awesome. There's going to be a game or two this year where he does go 7 innings and gives up 1 hit and no runs or something like that. It's not going to be as consistent as, say, a Hagen Smith.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, and he doesn't have the stuff that Hagen has. I mean, he's got more pitches in his arsenal, but none of his pitches are as good as Hagen's fastball or Hagen's slider, so he's starting from a little different point than Mr. Smith is. But still, he's been great. And then I think one last player that I think we really need to talk about, and maybe you got someone else, but before we maybe ask some questions about some of the negatives about this weekend, is Ben McLaughlin. Terrific defensive play over there at first base on Friday night in the crazy win. He came to life in, was it that game as well, or he had 2 hits, scored 2 runs. He's just been very consistent. I think he had 3 walks on uh, Saturday. Gosh, I'm getting Saturday, Sunday. These Thursday through Saturday series, Hutch have me confused a little bit right now. 3 walks on Saturday for McLaughlin. Just a steady, presence both on the field and in the lineup. A guy that you need to win games. He doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low, and he's really been one of their best players all season just because of his consistency.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think he's got, I want to say now has twice as many walks as he does strikeouts. So, I mean, that's always a good thing to have. He's got some power, got some pop, because one of those hits the other day was a home run. Just absolutely clobbered it. So, yeah, and then his defense has been very, very good, but you could still tell that he's not a natural first baseman.
It
You could
doesn't
tell.
look sexy at all over
Yeah,
there.
yeah. But he gets the job done most of the time. Now they probably need to work on some bunt coverage type things, because he'll come off, try to field a bunt, and then there's no one covering first base. They had that happen a couple of times this weekend, but he's still learning. People forget, and I'm guilty of this too. In junior college, he was a Gold Glove third baseman, so like he's been a good fielder, his whole life. We didn't really see it much last year because he was hurt and didn't really play much in the field. He was kind of a DH when he did play. This year, he looks the part of a first baseman, even though he's still learning the technicalities of it. I will say there's one more guy I do want to mention is Will Edmondson. He's a guy that has not played a whole lot this year. He was my kind of preseason pick to win the job in left field. They're still kind of rotating through some guys. We haven't seen Jason Jones in a little bit, so it seems like it maybe Ross Lovich, kind of was the leader. He had a rough weekend. Had dropped the fly ball. I don't think he really did much at the plate. Will Edmondson, they put him in, and then on Friday he delivers the bases loaded 2-run single. That was a huge hit, huge swing. I think he had an RBI single in Game 3 as well. So yeah, he had a really good weekend, and plays a solid defense. So who knows? Maybe he gets the next crack at it. But if he doesn't perform, then maybe we rotate back our way around to Jason Jones or Ross Lovich. But I was really impressed with Will Edmondson this past weekend.
Yeah, that's a good shout, and I also think we should just briefly mention Jared Sprague-Lott, because you mentioned Jason Jones. Jared Sprague-Lott right now is keeping Peyton Holt on the bench, for the most part, other than pitch hitting situations, and I don't think any of us really expected that at the beginning of the season. We thought Peyton Holt would be an everyday starter for them, and Sprague-Lott would be the guy that kind of rotates in for giving some of the infielders a day off, or getting him some at bats, but Jared started all 3 games this weekend. I thought he played pretty well in the field, and then he hit a 3-run home run on Saturday, and had an RBI on Friday as well. So it just shows the depth of this team. That I don't think that it's not one of the best lineups in the country, but 1 through 9 and even 1 through 12 all have the capabilities of beating an SEC team. So we'll take a quick break there, and Jackson's weekly Monday morning meeting that disrupts this podcast. We will come back in just a little bit, talk a little bit about some of the concerns from what we saw this weekend. Not too much, but need to touch on them, and then also LSU preview, and then we'll get the basketball portal talk as well. So stick around. All right, we're back here, and Hutch, I guess I've been teasing some bad conversation topics, and I feel during that work meeting, I felt like, there's not too much, but I do think it's worth bringing up one particular player that struggled this weekend, Brady Tigert, and that's just kind of 2 straight weekends of some, the last weekend against Missouri, he didn't give up a run in 4 2/3. He only gave up 1 hit, but he did give up 4 walks. He's now had 9 walks in his past 2 starts. It it just hasn't looked like particularly sharp in the last two starts. And those walks are kind of obvious, but he's been a little erratic throughout the whole season. It feels like where he gets into deep counts, but he's found a way to get out of them now against some better offenses. Maybe it's just I'm curious what you've seen Tigert over the past couple of years, and covered him a lot in the fall. Is this maybe more in line of who he's going to be this year, where it won't be that guy that was 5 innings the first 3 weeks of the year, just no more than one run, or is this maybe just a blip and we think he can get back to being a very consistent starting pitcher, consistent and elite starting pitcher for Arkansas this year?
Well, you can't really look to his past for an answer because he's never really been a starter. I mean, he started a little bit at the end of last year, but most of those until the very end were, 1 or 2 innings as they were slowly working him back. So this is really the first time we've seen him as a full-time starter and get turned loose. Uh, I don't think it's too much of a concern because I asked Matt Hobbs that specifically after, I guess it was game 2 because it was the game Dave Van Horn missed, which we haven't even mentioned that yet. But we got to talk to Matt Hobbs afterwards, which is great. He does talk a lot. So it was it was a more lengthy press conference than it probably would have been if it was Dave Van Horn, but really insightful stuff, especially on the pitchers. And he said there was, there was a you'll mention a technical thing. I think I'm actually going to write about this week. Is there's kind of a technical thing that they've easily identified and that they think is going to be relatively easy to fix. Obviously we want to see it actually implemented, and there'll be a tough challenge this weekend whenever it's LSU in town. But it didn't sound like when I asked Matt Hobbs about it, it was very nonchalant, just like kind of like no worries at all. Very similar to what you were saying about asking Dave Van Horn about Hagen Smith after week 1. It was that same kind of like, oh, it's no big deal. We've got it figured out. We know what's going on, and they'll be able to fix it.
Yeah, I hope so, because I will say if the struggles do continue, I wouldn't be opposed to them flipping Molina and Tigert in the weekend rotation. And I mean, I guess that would feel like a demotion for Tigert, and that might not be something that's good for his mental state. And if the team's 19-3, I don't think we should be taking these drastic, we should be making decisions that could negatively impact a starter's mindset. But I do think there's something to be said about saving as many bullpen guys as you can for that final game. And if Mason's going to be, I mean, he's only going 5 innings, but if he's going to be a guy that even eats up 1 or 2 more innings every weekend than Tigert, I think that's substantial, even in that small amount of a difference. So will be interesting to see how he bounces back this weekend. A huge test at home against LSU. A couple other guys, we kind of mentioned Lovich. Nolan Souza didn't have the best weekend either. I think he only had 1 hit, maybe in 8, 9, 10 at bats, something like that. It'll be interesting to see if DVH continues to trust the freshman after this weekend coming back home. I don't really know if he has an obvious option to replace Souza right now at the DH spot. Maybe he gives Ryder Helfrich a run again. Do you think? I think we're going to see Helfrich start on Tuesday against Little Rock. Are you kind of in the boat of maybe it's time to give the freshman a little bit more run after his heroics on Friday night?
I think so. I mean, you got to give him another chance, and it's not like the other guys have done a lot to earn. I mean, obviously we know Hudson White's basically the starter. He's an older guy. He's done fine. They did give Parker Rowland to start over the weekend, and didn't go well for him. Behind the plate, he tried a couple of back picks, and usually that's something he's really good at. And that's what was so surprising is like that's usually been his strength. And both of the back picks got away from him, sailed into the outfield, one at first, one at third. I think both of them ended up really kind of costing Arkansas. So I think you got to give Ryder Helfrich a chance and see what he can do.
Good thing Eric Musselman's not the head coach. Otherwise, Parker Rowland would be a DNP for the next 3 games, I think. But yeah, that was the other thing I was going to mention. The defense this weekend, there was at least 1 error in both games. Friday night, the 2 errors were both off Parker Rowland. But Souza and Wilmsmeyer both made mistakes in the outfield. It didn't look like you said about McLaughlin. I think you can say that about a lot of the team, kind of, other than maybe Aloy and Stovall. Is there's just and Wilmsmeyer when he's in center, but even he made a mistake. There's a lot of guys that just they don't seem 100% like fluid at their positions. Even Kendall Diggs, who's a much improved right fielder, that's not his natural, starting point as a baseball player. And there's times there where he looks a little uncomfortable going after fly balls. Did make a diving play that looked a little uncomfortable on Friday night. But the defense is something to worry about. But hey, 19-3, 5-1. They're the number one ranked team in America. And they've got LSU coming to town, Hutch. I mean, just, you know, how big is this weekend series for Arkansas? It feels like we've kind of reached a point of all right. It's now it gets a little bit it gets real. I mean SEC play it gets real. The first road series it gets real. But Arkansas has had a pretty favorable start to life in the SEC when you compare the other teams. LSU, for example, has started, or excuse me, Florida, for example, has started the year with Texas A&M and LSU and won both of those series. So just how big is this? Is this? I know Arkansas baseball fans are spoiled with these kind of matchups every year, but they still take on a different meaning, right?
Yeah, LSU just means a little bit more. That's the series everyone always circles and looks forward to. And up until the last few years, LSU typically had Arkansas's number. Arkansas had a hard time, winning a series, and I can't remember if they've had a long stretch where Dave Van Horn was like 0-10 in rubber matches against LSU, which is just a bizarre stat to think about because yes, LSU has been very, very good, but typically so has Arkansas. So you'd think that they'd win at least a couple of those, and but recently they've kind of knocked the door down and have beaten LSU several times. They lost the series last year, but they took game one. With Paul Skeens on the mound down there in Baton Rouge. I think that was a battle of top three teams. Uh, Probably won't be as highly ranked this year because LSU has lost its first two series. I think they're 2-4 in SEC play, so it's not like a battle of number one versus number two like what we thought we might get. Instead, it's probably just gonna be another basic top 25 matchup at Bob Walker Stadium.
LSU is their number. Oh gosh, I thought the USA Today poll already came out. That's my mistake. The USA Today poll has not come out as of this time, but according to D1 Baseball's rankings, LSU is number 8 in the country, and I imagine they will be somewhere around there in the coaches poll as well. So, a regular ho hum top 10 matchup, Hutch, not top 25. Come on, but I think the LSU thing, the series, the thing, what I can't get my words out of my mouth. This thing that most intrigues me about this matchup is going to be LSU's hitters against Arkansas's pitchers, because we did see, against Auburn this weekend that there are I mean, I still think this is either the best pitching rotation in the nation or one of the best pitching rotations in the country. But we did see against Auburn, like there is a drop off from Hagen Smith to the rest of the group. In the regular season, earlier in the season, the production had been about the same, right? In terms of ERA and giving up runs and getting out of jams, like the pitchers were matching Smith. I think Hagen, showed that little bit of separation this weekend with how brilliant he was, and just Auburn had some success against the other pitchers. Arkansas's hitting hasn't quite found its groove yet, and the pitching staff needs to still remain elite if it's going to come away with a series win over LSU.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. LSU, they're defending national champs, and last year they did have Paul Skeens, but the reason they won was because of their offense. I mean, they're incredible. They don't have Dylan Cruz anymore. He got drafted, but I do know they still have Tommy Tanks. He's hitting over 300, got 6 home runs. They've got a guy, Jared Jones, who's got 10 bombs already. They've got 35 home runs in 25 games already. So it's going to be a challenge for this pitching staff. I'm very much looking forward to seeing Luke Holman on the mound. That's a guy that whenever he first entered the portal from Alabama, he was kind of the first guy I was like, okay, that's the guy Arkansas needs to go after. And I think they did, but they didn't get him. Instead, they got Mason Molina. Oh darn! It's pretty, it's gonna be a lot of fun. The atmosphere is gonna be absolutely incredible. This is, I think, gonna be your first true experience of a packed out, intense, exciting, Baum-Walker Stadium crowd. Very, very much looking forward to it. And yeah, the challenge of facing that lineup is going to be really fascinating to watch for Arkansas's pitchers versus their hitters.
Yeah, Luke Coleman's been terrific this year, and LSU has not really um, kept the training wheels on for very long for him. I mean, he was pitching deep into games right away from the start of the season against Florida this past weekend. He started game one, 6 innings, 1 hit, 1 run, 13 strikeouts, 104 pitches. I mean, that's about 25 more pitches than Hagen's thrown, I think, in any game this year, or maybe 20 pitches more. But that's going to be an exciting, exciting pitching matchup. Luke Coleman versus Hagen Smith. And look, we just talked a little bit about the struggles of Brady Tigard, and you know the bullpen kind of let go of the rope there. We didn't, really get into specifics, but I still think Arkansas's pitching staff is a clear step above LSU's, and that advantage has to show itself this weekend for the Hogs. So, um, anything else baseball related, Hutch, that at the top of your mind? We didn't really talk about the bullpen that blew the lead in Game 3. It was Dossett, Gabe Gackle, and Colin Fisher. I'm not really concerned about any of those guys. Any lasting talking points for you coming out of Auburn before we turn the page to LSU officially?
Yeah, I'll mention something about that bullpen. It's easy to overreact because they did blow the 4-run lead, and especially Gackle and Dossett didn't go well. But I think also that was Dave Van Horn and Matt Hobbs still, as crazy as it sounds, it's SEC play, still somewhat experimenting, seeing what they could do. They were trying to figure out, is Dossett a guy that could pitch on back-to-back days? He didn't throw a ton the night before, but he did have that 30-minute delay. So that's why I was like, oh, this is a little bit weird bringing him first out of the bullpen. But I think they're just trying to see like, hey, what do we got in this guy? Is this going to be a dude who can do that? They would have never known Kevin Kopps could do that if they hadn't have tried it. And then they found out, okay, he can do it, and they stuck with it. So I don't think you're going to see Cooper Dossett pitching on back-to-back days anytime soon. Gabe Gackle, this is the first time he's pitched twice on a weekend. As crazy as that sounds, he's pitched a couple times in a week where maybe he's pitching a midweek and then pitched on Friday or Saturday or something like that. But this is the first time he's truly pitched twice on a weekend, and the second time didn't go well. So maybe they kind of hone it back a little bit. Maybe you try to, instead of only throwing him in a 1-inning situation, maybe you bring him in and let him throw, burn it for 3 innings, and hey, you got 3 innings out of him, and you're good. To me, it's like they're still kind of learning those roles, and it was a good time to do it too because you'd already clinched the series.
Yeah, I kind of had that thought too, but one thing that I did wonder about is, so what, let's say they weren't tinkering, they weren't experimenting, who then becomes the guy that should have come in to that spot on Saturday, with a 4-0 lead or 4-1 lead in the top of the 6th, right? Because, we just saw Dossett and Gackle, neither of them could really get an out, I don't think. And then Colin Fisher came out and did 2 2/3, and he pitched pretty well, but he gave up the home run to McMurray. I mean, like, that's my question. Is I'm not gonna sit here and hit the panic button, but if those guys can't throw back-to-back days or twice in the weekend, it does kind of shrink the availability of elite arms that you have. Maybe it's just straight to Colin Fisher, and maybe we're about to enter a spot where Colin Fisher no longer can be a midweek starter because he's got too much value on the weekend.
That was going to be my thought, was that maybe you just go straight to Colin Fisher. He didn't pitch, exceptional. Like, he didn't pitch like he did against Oklahoma State. But he did okay. He did a solid job. Maybe you start with him right out of the jump and get through, and maybe you give up a couple of runs, but who knows? But yeah, if he's going to do that, then it's going to be hard to start him on the midweeks. But maybe you could get away with that if you've got Ben Bybee coming back. We've yet to see him on the mound, and he's the guy I had projected as that 4th starter before the season. So if he could come back, Dave kind of hinted at him, never mentioned his name, but he said, we've got some guys that got to come back from sickness and injury and stuff. Ben Bybee would be that guy, so I'm very much looking forward to that. Plus, it's almost April, which means it's almost Hunter Dietz time. So you've got some incredible arms, waiting in the wings to come up. So I still think they're okay, and they're gonna be fine. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see kind of how Colin Fisher's role evolves over the next few weeks.
I think and Dave's pressed the right button almost with everything this year. He pressed one wrong button this weekend, and what you're saying is it was an intentional mistake. He not intentional, but you know what I mean. He wanted to see what he had. So it's hard to criticize him or to even recommend anything for DVH, but I would be kind of surprised if Colin Fisher starts on Tuesday. I think based off what he said in the press conference that they got to see some guys. Maybe he goes out there and throws an inning just to keep him in the starters routine. But I'm starting to lean towards, I think Colin Fisher provides more value for this Arkansas team out of the bullpen, because the one thing that they haven't had this year out of the bullpen is, they've got Stone Hewlett, but they don't have a lefty that is really more than a lefty specialist. And maybe that's Hunter Dietz when he comes back, but we got to see that too. We've seen Colin Fisher be a pretty good pitcher whenever he's been thrown into the fire. And I think that maybe there's some extra value of holding him and keeping him fresh for a Saturday or Sunday. And I mean, this is completely projecting, but maybe he's a guy that follows Brady Tigert, as instead of him following Mason Molina, two lefties back to back, maybe he can be a Saturday or a game 2 guy after the right-handed starting pitcher. I don't know. Lots still. It's crazy. We've played 22 games. There's still lots to figure out, and then we're gonna have a lot more questions as the year goes on.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, you get 7 out of Hoggin, then go to Gackle for 2, and then you got McIntyre ready to go for the last 2 games. And the key is a starting pitching eating up as much innings as possible. So they do that, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago. That'll really significantly cut down the bullpen innings and should make things a little bit easier.
I think we see it. I think this week we see Hoggin get to 7 innings, maybe even 8 against LSU on Friday. I think this is an opportunity for to go win game 1. Let's ride the ace, but we'll see. That's maybe my bold prediction for the week. All right, let's move on to the transfer portal in basketball. I will not lie, Hutch. I hate the transfer portal. I hate everything about it. I hate the list of the 40 schools that have contacted one guy. I mean, what does that even mean? Is that a Snapchat? Is that, we're phoning you trying to get you on a visit? A contact can mean so much. It can mean nothing. Let me preface that. I say I hate the transfer portal. I'm pro the transfer portal for the kids. Obviously, they should be able to move school to school just like any other student. For the time being with how the NCAA is currently constructed. But I just don't like the drama and the discussion about it all. So I'll turn the floor over to you right now. It's been about 1 week of the transfer portal. What has maybe caught your eye with the Arkansas basketball team, who they've reached out to, maybe who they've got visiting, and of course, the guys that have left? We've seen a handful of 5 names now enter the transfer portal from Arkansas.
Yeah, I think that last thing you just mentioned is the thing that's caught my eye the most. Is we kind of already know like so many guys that have already entered the portal. I mean, Devo Davis enters the portal, not exactly surprising. It was a little bit of a bummer to see Layden Blocker also enter the portal, just because he's an Arkansas kid who you really liked what you saw from him, and he was the guy we talked about that would have been huge for them to keep. But probably a little bit didn't get the most consistent playing time. It was a little bit weird there. So he moves on. You lose Joseph Pinion, not surprising. Denaja Harris, who we didn't even know still had eligibility left. Keon Minifield, a guy that, again, kind of disappeared down the stretch. So to me, that's like the biggest story right now, because it's still a little bit of a slow-moving, rate right now. I don't know what the number's up to as far as the guys they've contacted, but it's a lot. It's a lot. But, like you said, Eric Musselman's even told us, like, you see these lists of guys we've contacted. Well, yeah, we may have contacted him, but just because we contacted him doesn't mean we're offering them a scholarship to come play at Arkansas. It's he's even said they'll contact a guy to talk to him about another guy. or hey, tell us what your favorite, baseline out of bounds play is. Just kind of pick a guy's brain. Like they just, I guess Eric Musselman just really likes talking to high school kids or college kids and just kind of picking their brains, and so it's pretty crazy to see all the number they're up to. But yeah, I think I saw where Josh Cohen maybe from UMass is going to be visiting. He's I think 6'11" big man, a guy who started out somewhere else smaller, like St. Francis or something like that. Because I think he was the NEC Player of the Year. Ended up going to UMass. I think they're in the A10 maybe in basketball. I think he had a pretty solid, productive year. Not quite as gaudy numbers as he did in the NEC, but still enough to where the A10 is pretty good basketball conference. That's where you got the Mitchell twins, and they turned out to be, especially Mackay, turned out to be pretty solid. So I think he's either did come or is coming on a visit. So he's a guy to keep an eye on as well. And there's been so many names they've contacted. It's hard to keep it all straight up in your head.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with Musselman reaching out to all these people. It's just the Twitter social media reporting of the transfer portal is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Because before we get back to Arkansas, let me just rant here for a second, Hutch. Do you remember last year in the transfer portal, who was the biggest name, the most game-changing talent, the guy that had the biggest drama with his recruitment out of everybody in the country? Do you remember, Hutch? Maybe I'm not doing a good job being a host, but
is it Grant Nelson?
no, it's
Or
Hunter
Hunter
Dickinson.
That's right.
Hunter Dickinson, who goes to Kansas, and everyone says, "Oh my goodness, Kansas is going to win the national title again with this guy." And they could not play a lick of defense against Gonzaga. Literally, they were matadors, letting the Bulls run right through the red flag into the basket. It was just, I think Kansas was leading at halftime, and Gonzaga had missed like 5 layups or something, and I was like, oh, this is a problem for Kansas. So I just want to get that out there, like, and Grant Nelson's another good one. Alabama's still alive, but when he went to Alabama, it was like, oh gosh, this guy is going to be a huge difference maker, and I guess he has been for the most part, but I think he hasn't maybe lived up to the lofty expectations. Take Arkansas, for example, of all the offensive talent they got through the transfer portal. It's just impossible. Like, we're playing a video game right now and how we analyze these guys. And it's fun, especially if you're a college basketball sicko and you live for the sport. But I'm pretty locked in on this baseball team. With all that said, I want to go back to Layden Blocker because it was hurtful for, I think, Arkansas fans and the program that he is entering the transfer portal. And, we both said that we really thought he was a key piece that Musselman needed to try and do to bring back. However, I've seen a lot of people, kind of bemoaning his departure, but the stats at some point don't lie. And he shot 11% from 3-point range, 62% from the free throw line. Now, maybe he gets better as he develops, as he gets older. I wouldn't even say maybe. I'll say he probably gets better. But 11% from the 3-point line is a really low starting point for a guard. And in today's college basketball, I think your guards have to be better shooters. And I think that there's maybe a ceiling to what Blocker can provide to a team. And that ceiling was never going to be kind of reached at Arkansas, because as long as there's those offensive limitations, he was not going to be a starter for them. I think he like the best he could have maybe hoped for was kind of a sixth man, defensive stopper role. And that's clearly not something that he wants. He wants to be more involved, and that's why he's in the transfer portal right now. So I think it hurts, but I'm not panicking and, putting Musselman's reputation down to the fact that he let this talented in-state native go. I think 11% from 3 is really, really horrible. It's terrible.
Counterpoint.
Okay.
I know this isn't the best example because of this past year, but let's take this past year out of the equation. Devo Davis, okay? As a freshman, he shot 15% from 3-point range. So not a whole lot, but not quite 11%, but not a whole lot better. The next year, he shot 27%. Still not great, but decent. The following year, he shot just under 35%, but even that's a little bit deceiving because during SEC play, he actually evolved into like a bona fide, like legitimate 3-point threat. Like he was shooting 40% in SEC play or something like that. So you can improve. Plus, he has that same blocker did have that same like defensive intensity that Devo Davis did. He still had kind of that playmaking ability where he wasn't as much of the passer that Devo Davis was, which may be a little bit of a problem if you're a point guard. But he did he had a knack for getting to the rim. He didn't always finish, but he would get to the rim. And so to me, I saw enough where I'm like, okay, if he makes some natural progressions, he could be a solid player. Maybe not, a superstar stud, but the kind of player you need in your program to, make a Sweet 16 or an Elite 8 like you did Devo Davis's first 3 years. And Devo Davis, say what you want about him, he was a critical part of those teams. From hitting a buzzer beater to beat Oral Roberts to his just incredible performance against Kansas in the round of 32 to get to the Sweet 16. That's kind of what I thought, and plus, Layden Blocker, Devo Davis, they both love the state. They're from here. I think that there is some value to that. It's not the end all be all for sure, but I think there is some value. And as it stands right now, I don't think there's any Arkansas natives set to be on the roster next year, which I don't think that's ever happened. I'd have to go back and look to double check, but I think that would be a first. I think they have contacted a few Arkansas guys in the portal, so maybe they get one of those. But as of right now, doesn't look like there's going to be any Arkansas natives on the roster, which I don't necessarily like. I mean, I don't think you have to go get everybody. Get the small town kids who aren't going to ever play. You don't have to keep a Joseph Pinion. It would have been nice if that had worked out, but you need some of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'm not saying Layden Blocker leaving is a good thing, and I'm not saying I'm not, and it is a bad thing that he left. I think it would have been good for the program for Layden Blocker to have stayed. I'm just not overreacting to his departure just yet. Maybe we can play this clip in a few years and I'm completely wrong. I think Layden Blocker's offensive ceiling is lower than Devontae Davis, even after what we saw from Devo this year. It's not a good looking shot. You mentioned like the assists. He ends the season averaging 1 assist a game and fewer than a turnover a game. So you're like, oh, his assist to turnover ratio was positive. But 9 of his assists this season, which were not that many, he got 9 assists in the Furman and Lipscomb games, which were both close for a little while there, and they needed his production. But still, though, the assist numbers really dried up in SEC play until that brief little run at the end of the year when he got, I think he played almost 25 minutes in back-to-back games against LSU and Missouri. Maybe I eat my words. I'm not quite panicking over Layden's departure. I think Musselman definitely can bring someone in that provides that same defensive intensity and maybe shoots 30% from 3. Can be a guy that is a consistent shooter. We'll see. And to your Arkansas point, obviously I'm not a native of this state. I love when my favorite teams have guys from the hometown and the home state. I think it does mean something and it's important. But the Arkansas baseball team's, starting lineup most nights this year doesn't have a single guy from Arkansas either, and they're doing pretty well right now. It's just it's one of those things where it makes life a lot, makes cheering for the team more fun, and in some ways can bring some more pride, for the team. But I don't think it's ever a net, I don't think it's a net negative really. I think it can only be a positive having those guys in. So. I'm fascinated to see where Musk goes in the portal from here. You mentioned the guy from UMass, a big scorer. He needs a lot of pieces, and we still might not be done with departures. Given KB, Tremont, and Trevin Brazile all have decisions to make.
Yeah, we've still got some decisions coming, and again, people are going to freak out. Like, why hasn't anybody committed at this point? But the portal's only been open for a week, so I mean. It's going to take some time, folks, And
Hutch,
even
Missouri
then,
has a commit. Missouri has a commit before Arkansas.
hey, they have more commits than SEC wins. Good for them. Uh, but I think back to a couple of years ago. I mean, I think Justin Smith, was a late ad. Trying to think of some other. Ricky Council was a summer ad. So I mean, this could go on for a little bit. And I think the biggest thing is hey, Eric Musselman's still your head coach right now, and he's still out there recruiting for Arkansas. Does that mean that he's 100%, 1,000% going to be here? No, but I'd say right now it's a positive, encouraging sign, even if they haven't gotten any commitments yet.
Certainly seems to be trending to him staying here, but I don't. Dusty May, the FAU coach, electing to go to Michigan, certainly does not help the faction of Arkansas supporters that want Musselman to stay, because that he was, for all intents and purposes, projected to go to Louisville. We haven't really heard any rumors about Musselman and Michigan. So now that Louisville remains an open job, they got to figure it out. And there's been a lot of buzz about Musselman and Louisville. So that's just kind of, and then of course they could snatch up UCLA's coach, Mick Cronin, which would just completely ramp up the Musselman buzz as a Southern California guy. But for right now, he, like you said, he is recruiting. He's, trying to get players to Fayetteville. He's the Arkansas head coach. And I kind of thought that if Musselman were going to leave, that the move would have been made quickly after the season. And now we're heading into the second week of the Arkansas offseason. And not to say that it can't happen, but it's definitely exceeded my expected timeline of a potential departure from Musselman. So anything else, Hutch, transfer portal wise? And we'll talk football next week because we had no practice, but I think we're good to wrap up there, huh?
Yeah, I think that covers about everything.
Yeah, just a reminder for anyone listening. I mean, you can go check out. I don't know if Arkansas has released the details on this yet, but you can go check out the Arkansas football practice on Saturday. It'll be open to the public. Hutch and I will, well, I'm speaking for him, but I'm assuming Hutch and I will be there on Tuesday and Thursday for the practices that are open to the media, and then Saturdays as well. Really exciting week here in Fayetteville with the, football practice opening to the media, and then you've got the LSU series over the weekend. So, Hutch, we'll close it there. Thank you so much for joining me. Good episode today. I will see you tomorrow at football/baseball. Everyone that is listening, have a great rest of your week. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in to Hoggin the Mic. We will talk to you next Monday.